Let's talk about deployment enrollment. An enrollment determines how dbt Cloud will execute project in the dbt Cloud IDE for development and schedule jobs for deployment. There is no limit to the number of deployment enrollments, providing the flexibility and customization to execution of the jobs. Let's create new deployment enrollment. Create enrollment, and let's name it as EDH prod. And then there are three types of deployment environments we can create. General, staging, production. It is highly recommended using the production environment type for the final source of truth deployment data. So we are going to pick production. And then enrollments define three variables. The version of the DBT core that will be used to run the project. For example, in this case, we are keeping on latest version. Eventually, DBT is going to retire version and keep versionless for the future. But for now, we are going to keep it keep on the latest versionless. Then the version of your code to execute. In the Git repository, usually the main branch code is used for production deployment, but we can specify a custom branch code to be used for deployment. So by clicking on this, only run and custom branch. So we can name as a real main branch or whatever branch we can, our actual real code will reside on. Normally it is the main branch, so the default is main, so we don't need to name a custom branch. The warehouse connection information, including the target database schema settings, we can create a new connection for the deployment environment, but for the demo, we will use the connection we defined earlier in the course. We can override the defined connections, role, database, or warehouse. For this demo, we'll keep them as is. So I'm going to pick connection we already defined in the previous session. And then on the connections, we are going to leave them as is, but we have an ability to change the database name. Here we want to deploy to IDS database on Snowflake. I'm leaving it as is. We can change the role the login is going to use. We can change the warehouse the connection will use, but I'm going to leave them default for now. The deployment credentials determine the credentials that should be used when connecting to your warehouse. For example, for Snowflake, auth method, username, password, schema, etc. It is recommended to use key pair auth method for better security. It is recommended that the data warehouse credentials be for a dedicated user or a service principal for production environment deployments. For the demo, I'm using my credentials, user, and then my password. And then the schema, we are going to want the models to be deployed is IDS data under IDS database. So let's test the connection. Okay. The connection is all good, successful. We are good to go. The one last step on deployment environments is extended attributes. For all warehouses, we use extended attributes to override missing or inactive grayed out settings. For example, to override account. So since the connection was created, we used a connection, the account is grayed out, we can't override those, right? So for those sort of properties we want to override, we can put in the extended attributes. And also connections such as connection timeout value, we want to use the settings from a profiles.yaml file enrollment variables, which are defined on the project level, on the account level. All those variables we could use in the extended properties to override any of the connection and credential settings. Let's save this. So that creates our deployment, production deployment environment.